Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel, where we're a little bit late, but we're still here. So, yeah, it just took a little while to clean up after the making of some soup. How's everybody doing, chat? Just have to find the right windows so we can look at all the delicious, nutritious assholes in my reaction fodder. And that just sounded totally wrong. Bonsoir. Okay. We've got some... Okay, we've got some PragerU stuff. We've got Caleb Maupin talking about love, and Peter Coffin, the Good Take Factory, interviews Caleb Maupin. I'm kind of interested in either of those two. Then we've got Keffel's The Weirdest Tanky Video I've Ever Seen. Oh yeah, a couple of new Caleb stuffs. Yeah, that's what I think I'm going to start out with. Trying to decide. I mean, love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. That seems like that's going to be some interesting shit. But then the Caleb Muppet, Peter Coffin interview, letter to Bob Avakian of all things. Like, from a not particularly successful cult leader to another. It's true. Caleb really is. God, this is letter to Bob I mean, I'm kind of gravitating towards letter to Bob Avakian. I think we're going to do letter to Bob Avakian. At least start with that. Let me know how the audio is. I can make adjustments early on. Oh, that's way too quiet. I can't even hear it. Okay, he's gone back to his, like, fucking yearbook photo angle. I mean, I don't know, he looks like a fucking character in Parks and Rec all of a sudden. I've never even seen that show, but it just seems to fit. I've never thought of him that way. Hey, Adam, how you doing?
On both my channel and
let me know how the audio is.
So we're gonna kind of
we're looking at letter to Bob Avakian, in which, I mean, the Good Take Factory, Peter Coffin interviews the not creepy or dodgy at all Caleb Muppet, in apparently a love letter to the guy who calls himself the Elvis of Revolution, in by which I suppose he means he stole it from black people? Seriously, Bob Avakian once, if you look up, like, the Elvis of Revolution or something like that, you will find, from several years ago, a flyer online, an advertisement for an event that the RCP were doing, where Bob Avakian was going to speak. And they called him the Elvis of Revolution.
Co-host this, but I'll be interviewing. Caleb, my friend here, and also the founder of the Center for Political Innovation.
Two of them, in fact, because the first one kicked him out.
Has published a new book on Bob Avakian.
What? He's published a book on... Okay, Bob Avakian, okay. One of the most confusing things about the various, like, authoritarian cults that exist is that a number of them have the same name in different countries, and they're totally different organizations. Like, there is a Revolutionary Communist Party in Canada. There used to be a Revolutionary Communist Party in Britain that is now spiked and gets money from the Koch brothers. And in the U.S., the Revolutionary Communist Party is the personal promotion vehicle of a guy called Bob Avakian, who I should note, I mean, it is just a full-blown cult of personality around a guy called Bob. And, I mean, yeah, he has his synthesis, and, yeah. And the party, well, they agree with everything Bob has to say.
It is called Letter to Bob Avakian. It is a very
Dear Bob, I'm as a journeyman cult leader myself, I have been quite impressed by your success. How do you do it?
Book that covers, as you might expect if you've read any of Caleb's
other books. We're getting an echo, Peter.
Oh, sorry.
Well, of course you're getting an echo. I mean, you put Peter Coffin and Caleb Maupin in a room, you're going to get an echo.
Oh, that's from me. That's from my end. Wow, that's on me. That is totally me. Wow, there you go. Now people know this is a genuine conversation. This is not staged. This is
Well, except the thing is, I've seen when they're staged. First of all, like, why would they need to stage it? I mean, they're both mates. I mean, it's not like this was going to be some sort of, like, hard-nosed fucking conversation to begin with. This isn't like intrepid investigative journalist Peter Coffin gets to the bottom of the CPI. I mean, they're both members of the same cult. But yes, I mean, it is quite characteristic of Caleb Muppet to not know how microphones work.
Yeah. Like, we are speaking from the heart on Saturday night, and I have the YouTubes open, and they started talking as you were talking. So continue, Peter.
I have to stop saying the YouTubes now. He just made it uncool.
It's actually Saturday Night Live. Like, you got the evidence. Right. So, if you've read any of Caleb's other books,
then you know that this one is gonna suck. Because they're basically just Twitter threads. I mean, he like, in his last one, which is the one where he claims that all of BreadTube, a concept that he defines in a very idiosyncratic way, to include fucking Destiny, who hates literally everybody else that he lists in as a member of BreadTube. But he credits somebody as being the proofreader and editor, and there is a fucking typo right in the blurb, and then it just goes downhill from there. On the back cover blurb, there is a typo that the proofreader he credits did not catch. And, I mean, that's just before we get into the fact that all he does is just one big Gishgalop. That is Gilgamesh's lesser-known cousin, Gishgalop, of just sort of bullshit generalizations that he never provides an example of. I mean, it's just like one really gargantuan Twitter thread that he turned into book form. There is no exact definition of BreadTube because it's not an organization. I mean, fundamentally, it originates as a Reddit thread, and it's like leftist content creators on YouTube. Yeah, hence bread, as in conquest of the Kropotkin book. And different people would define it different ways, but it's not like some sort of tightly cohesive organizational structure. But according to Caleb Muppet, BreadTube is just literally the CIA. That's what his book is. Like, I mean, it's called BreadTube Serves Imperialism. And as I'm not the first person to point out, I think Thought Slime has pointed this out as well. I mean, there's an obvious argument to be made there, because if you look at BreadTube creators, most of them aren't talking about geopolitics very systematically. Most of them are not talking really in any detail about imperialism. And you could say that by failing to address those things, that BreadTube does kind of do imperialism a little bit of a solid there. But no, that's too realistic for Caleb Maupin. So he comes up with this idea that because somebody by the name of Caleb Kane, who I've never heard of except in this book, but is supposedly part of BreadTube, had connections to, what's the guy's name? Dr. Steve Hassan. or Hassan, I'm not sure how he pronounces it, who was once in the Moonies, which did have ties to the CIA, but famously his entire career was fighting against the Moonies after he got out of it. But so therefore they are a CIA psyop. I mean, it is literally, it is the case that I'm making is like even just half remembered is actually more detailed than the one that he makes in this fucking book.
You would know that although there is a very obvious topic noted in the title and the theme, but it covers a broad range of things.
Yeah, in other words, it's another Gish Galop.
And it's all obviously focused through the lens.
How's the audio? You hearing the video okay?
Bob Avakian, but you are going to walk away with a lot more if you read this book. Now,
you're going to walk away with even more if you don't buy this book, because you're going to walk away with significantly less if you pay for this fucking book.
What I'm basically going to do is, I think, cover most of our basic points and kind of tee you up to talk about what's important in this book. So I think it's probably good to just start with Bob Avakian. For people who are unaware...
Oh, this should be interesting. Is he going to... Which way is he going to go? Because he's been... It's like... He has... This is not the first time that Caleb Muppet has specifically decided to target the RCP, which I should note also has some red-brown shit going on. At the very least, let me put it this way. I have to put this very cautiously, because the information is the sort of information that merits a certain amount of caution. But okay, there was a guy, a cop in Portland by the name of Jeff Nia, a lieutenant, who got caught basically having very cozy relations with neo-Nazis every time they would show up in Portland. And it became a little bit of a scandal, and at one point, the city were forced to release all of the text messages from his work, from his work mobile and from other mobiles that were involved in this. And one of the things, and it was all these conversations that he was having with Joey, what's his name, of Patriot Prayer and other fash groups. And in the context of this, Joey, God, what's his name? Patriot Prayer dickhead. Patriot Prayer Joey Gibson, that's what his name is. Joey Gibson. He says that they've had an approach from Refuse Fascism, which is a front group of the RCP, Bob Avakian's group, suggesting that they kind of work together or something. Now, of course, Joey Gibson's full of shit. But but there's no reason he would tell this. But it seems to me, in this case, that there seems like there might be something to that, in the sense that this was never something that he said publicly. This is something he said in private conversations with cops that he happened to know were very actively targeting the people who showed up to oppose him. And so, actually, as bad as it looks to us for an RCP front group allegedly to be working together with those fash assholes, it potentially, and I have to say allegedly here, because like literally Joey Gibson's the only source I've seen on this, but it actually sounds like something that would be considered positive from their perspective. So it's like, that's dodgy as hell. And one thing I did not see after that became public, after all these text messages got like the local press released them and did stories on them, and I downloaded them and harvested and like fucking data mined the shit out of them. But like, I don't remember the RCP getting up and saying, no, we would have nothing to do with these assholes.
Bob, pardon me. Bob Avakian is the chairman of the Revolutionary Communist Party. He founded it in 1975. He's a 1960s New Left figure, and a lot of contemporary momentum is building that kind of sees the New Left as a rejection of Marx in one way or another. So, what makes Bob Avakian stand out from his contemporaries in that respect?
Well, that he has a tiny little group of people who have a cult of personality around him, and they have achieved nothing. Like, they've been around since 1975. That's like nearly half a century now. It's going on for half a century. And, like, you can list their achievements on, you don't even need one hand because they haven't got any. They haven't done anything. They've, like, promoted Bob Avakian all over the place, and that's it.
And why is he relevant now?
He isn't. That's an easy one. Nice starting out with a softball question there, Peter. No, Bob Avakian is not relevant now.
Well, during the 1970s, there were many 60s radicals who became communists. Many of them. Many of the people who marched against the Vietnam War, many of the people who marched for civil rights became communists. And many of them looked to China for inspiration, as opposed to the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union was pushing détente and wanted to negotiate with the United States, but China had this revolutionary image with Mao and the Cultural Revolution.
Okay, and I have to say, fair's fair. He's not wrong on this.
And so there were a number of different communist groups that were formed during the 1970s that were trying to become a new communist party that was aligned with China. Almost every single one of those groups has fallen apart or dissolved. The October League, the Communist Workers' Party, the Communist Labor Party, the Democratic Workers' Party. There was a whole alphabet soup of these groups. The Revolutionary Communist Party is still around.
Yeah, they're still around because they are just a fucking self-promotion vehicle for Bob Avakian. It's not like they're still. Being still around is nothing. Like the Socialist Workers' Party U.S. is still around. They haven't been relevant in decades, and when they do occasionally surface and make their opinions known, their opinions suck. So, the fact that a party has been around for a long time doesn't actually mean the party is good. Like, the U.S., you hear this bullshit, like, every 4th of July in the U.S. It's like, wow, we've managed to keep this Constitution going for over 200 years. And it's like, yeah, we should all... That's a slap in the face to every single person who lives in this country. Because that Constitution sucks. Like, even if you stick within just pure bourgeois constitutionalism, just pure bourgeois legalism, tons of countries have improved on the bullshit that those slaveholding assholes wrote in the Constitution back in the late 18th century. Continuity is not inherently a selling point.
And they have survived that. And I would argue that points to a certain level of leadership prowess on the part of Bob Avakian.
Well, that's an interesting way of putting it, because, again, he's like, yeah, it's just a cult of personality around him.
At what many people tried to do for a decade or so and then gave up and went home, he's still doing.
Yeah, Adam, he did indeed say that, and it's really unfortunate that he didn't actually get an opportunity to see how he felt about that in his lifetime.
He's 82 years old at this point, and his group is still up and running. They've got bookstores, they got regular webcasts. He's making talks. He had an event at Riverside Church a few years ago with Dr. Cornel West. He's still going. And that is certainly commendable. Why
is that inherently commendable, though? Like, so far the only thing we're getting here is they've been around a while. But lots of dodgy fuckers have been around for a while.
I recently saw that Samsara Taylor, a leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party, who's younger. She's only a few years older than me. She has been going around criticizing wokeness, which I thought was very commendable. But the reason she's doing that, and the whole reason I decided...
yeah, I mean, and what we saw, we saw something earlier in this arc on this stream, where he was reacting to this video of Samsara Taylor getting completely dunked on by members of the audience who said that it's ridiculous to act like somehow caring about respecting trans people takes away from concern for people who are starving in the imperial periphery. I mean, her whole thing was like that you should that it was somehow caring about trans people, caring about getting trans people's pronouns right, somehow was in opposition to caring that there are millions of people starving because of capitalism. And people in the audience just completely shredded everything she was saying. It was very nice to see. But I mean, you can see why Caleb Muppet, who has been trying to do this weird ass synthesis of like fake communism with all sorts of fascist shit, would look at that and say this is potentially a recruitment platform. Yeah, Ron Paul's been around for fucking donkey's years. He sucked every single of those years.
This book is because last summer they got canceled big time. Do you remember?
When did they get canceled? Like, what does that even mean at this point? Like, I would say most people on, like, the left, broadly understood, can go entire years not having heard a damn thing about what's going on with the RCP. I mean, the RCP, to most people who have heard of it, like most communists, most anarchists, most leftists in general, who have heard of it, is just something you occasionally point and laugh at. It's cringe corner.
For this, Peter, do you remember watching this happen?
I do. It was early midsummer, like around there, if I remember right.
Yeah, July of last year.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court overturned Roe versus Wade, and that is one issue that the RCP and Samsara Taylor in particular have like dedicated themselves to. They are pro-choice. They are in favor of abortion being legal. So they have this activist group called Rise Up for Abortion Rights, and they were like in the front lines of leading the pro-choice protests.
That's cute. Which is to say, they got their fucking branded placards all over the place, and most people said, "Who the hell are these people?"
All over the country. And AOC made a surprise appearance at one of their rallies and did like a photo op.
In other words, it was a rally they participated in. This is some bullshit you see a lot of these groups do. You'll have this huge rally with all sorts of people with all sorts of affiliations participating in, because it's a rally, I don't know, against the war, or against the Tories, or, in support of Standing Rock, or against police terror, or whatever. And so you get all sorts of people with all sorts of affiliations, but, one group, whether it's like the Answer Coalition, or the SWP, or somebody like that, will then say, oh, it's an SWP rally, all these people are here for an SWP rally, and it's like, if this had just been, this was advertised as just an SWP rally, you would have been fucking alone. It would have been like 5 years.
Samsara Taylor, and then immediately, Vice, The Intercept, Yahoo News, Daily Beast, all ran hit pieces about this cult, this multi-level marketing cult.
Well, now I'm kind of curious because I missed all of this, so I'm going to just check this out. I mean, it is a cult, though. Oh, here we go. Here's an article from Vice. I'm going to drop the link into chat. You can see. Okay, the abortion rights group other activists want nothing to do with. Yeah, sounds like they were all showing up for an RCP rally. Amid accusations of transphobia and links to a controversial communist group that's given them credit, Rise Up for Abortion Rights is recruiting young activists. See, this is one of these things these fucking groups do that annoys the shit out of me. They will never, rather than just show up openly and say, hey, we're the Revolutionary Communist Party, and we're fighting for this, they create these, like, front groups, like, fucking Useless Against Fascism, or Stand Up to Racism, or Rise Up for Abortion Rights, or whatever. And rather than just saying, yeah, we're the Revolutionary Communist Party and this is something we care about. Like, I mean, it's just... Let's see. Rise Up for Abortion Rights, a protest group active in several major cities, is pushing back against criticism that it's a pyramid scheme linked to a cult. Pyramid scheme I hadn't heard. So let's see, statement against Rise Up for Abortion Rights from whom? Who signed this? NYC for Abortion Rights, Reproductive Justice Collective, United Against Racism and Fascism NYC, Fund Abortion Not Police, Feminist Collages, Shout Your Abortion, sounds like some, the Jane Fund. I mean, fairly broad coalition of people with different ideological positions there. Yeah, let me just drop this in chat as well. Don't want shit to do with the RCP. Okay, here's what they say. Rise Up is a cult and a pyramid scheme. Rise Up is an offshoot of the RevCom, Revolutionary Communist Party group. Over the past few decades, RevCom has emerged as a personality cult revolving around its white male leader Bob Avakian. While RevCom fervently denies the accusations of it being a cult, RevCom's own website claims the only effective way to achieve social change is to follow Avakian's leadership and teachings. Okay. Rise Up's only goal appears to be gaining more followers in order to raise more and more money. Both essentially function as pyramid schemes. Okay, I mean, that's kind of a weird usage of pyramid schemes, but I see what they're saying, and this is exactly what a lot of these groups do. Like, I mean, they have these like purpose-built front groups, but all they really see it is as a marketing funnel for the party. That's how I would have put it. I mean, because pyramid scheme implies that there's some sort of an investment. Okay. RevCom and its fronts are notorious for raising tens of thousands of dollars and using those funds to pay RevCom leadership and to purchase marketing materials to raise even more money. Refuse fascism, exploit civil unrest to recruit followers, and Rise Up is now doing the same, repeating the same scheme. Rise Up website, for instance, features urgent prompts to donate with no information about where this money goes. What we do know is that this money never goes to abortion funds, which they argue are not a strategy to defend abortion access. Providers, practical support groups, or anyone actually working to increase abortion access. Let's see. Okay, so, I mean... Okay, Rise Up's leader, Sansara Taylor, she gets name-checked in here, has been a controversial figure in pro-abortion spaces. She and her followers are known for swooping into town and leeching off existing BIPOC-led grassroots efforts across the country. I'm reading this statement here. Additionally, Rise Up frequently likens abortion bans to female enslavement, which is profoundly disrespectful to Black, Indigenous, and POC comrades. Rise Up has a homophobic past and remains transphobic. Rise Up leaders frequently others trans and non-binary folks and excludes them for its speeches, writings, and conversations. Rise Up admitted they focus on women and girls, refer to trans and non-binary folks getting abortions as others. Up until 2002, the group's official position was that homosexuality contributed to women's oppression, amongst other nonsense. And they continue to intentionally exclude sex workers. Okay. And here, for people who want to know, like, it really is... Oh, yeah, I mean, he is deep into cults. One of the things, like, ex-CPI members, people who left CPI Mark 1, here, you can get an idea. I'm going to drop this into chat. This is from the RCP. This is how they present their great leader. Like, you can tell this is very much just a fucking Bob Avakian personal promotion vehicle.
That is co-opting social justice language, and they just ran their name through the mud. And I read these hit pieces, and I disagree with the Revolutionary Communist Party on many issues, which I make clear in the book. But I read these...
Name one of the issues, I mean, other than that you think that you should be the great leader.
These articles, and I was like, these articles are ridiculous. I mean, first of all, one of the things it was claiming is that the RCP is co-opting social justice language in order to build their organization.
Well, I mean, it seems like that's exactly what they're doing, though.
RCP was founded in 1975. Black Lives Matter started in, 2013, 2012?
Wow, I mean, and that was the first time that there was ever an anti-racism movement. 2012, I mean, so obviously, I mean, there was no, like, what if there was, like, a civil rights movement? I feel like there might have been one, like, in the 50s and 60s, like, maybe in the time leading up to when fucking RCP was founded. Like, maybe the struggle against racism, against misogyny, against all sorts of forms of oppression started before 2012, before there were hashtags? You think?
So if
2011
anything,
at the very earliest.
Yeah, so if anything, Black Lives Matter is co-opting their language, right?
What? Like, show me where that's happening. Where exactly is Black Lives Matter co-opting? Like, I mean, I missed the part where Black Lives Matter decided to, like, co-opt the image of the great leader, Comrade Bob Avakian. Or whatever.
Right? They've been in the streets marching against police brutality since before you or I were born.
No, Adria says, no, nothing ever happened before Caleb went to Occupy. Yeah, that's right. He's been involved in this for a decade and a half, remember, he says. I mean, that's ages ago. Like, I mean, nobody has been involved in any kind of political organizing longer than that. Well, I mean, I don't know, I have, but, I mean, lots of fucking people have. But, yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that is just a wild thing to say. The anti-racist co-opted the RCP. Hey, ¿qué estás trabajando?
Burger King.
Yeah.
You know, the RCP has been organizing around these issues. They started the October 22nd coalition to stop police brutality.
Which did what exactly? Like, seriously, what did any of these fucking groups do? Other than exactly what these people in these articles are saying, namely, siphon people off of these movements to sign them up to their cult. Which is, like, I mean, and this I should know, this isn't unique to the RCP, this is what the SWP in Britain do.
They were in the streets of New York City around Sean Bell and around Amadou Diallo. They were a bit...
Oh, no load shedding. You got an election coming up soon. Hey,
big factor in the LA rebellion of 1992.
The RCP was a big factor in the LA rebellion of 1992? What the fuck? Like, what a Reich here, the owl.
You know, their members, the rioting around Rodney King, their members were very key in, like, the protests that happened downtown after the Rodney King verdict happened.
Oh, so they latched on to that, too. Like, I mean, this is the sort of bullshit. I mean, and one of the things, I just have to point this out, because sometimes you can get the idea that certain things are unique that they aren't. But this is, like, literally just the way liberal NGOs think of history as well. Where it's like, it's not, the idea that just, like, working class people, marginalized people, acting, can act on their own, can act, and are a force in themselves who will respond to things and do things. And, revolutionaries are basically trying to, organized revolutionaries are basically trying to interpret that and respond to that and offer something to those people. They turn it all the way ass backwards and say that these groups are the reason, are the cause of it all. Like, I remember that fucking Freedom House plant, Sarah Kendzior, decided to do some outside agitators bullshit on Ferguson like a decade ago, or maybe longer now, and claimed that the RCP was the one stirring up all the uprising in Ferguson. This is the sort of bullshit. It's this whole thing. The idea is it's all outside agitators, and it depends. Are you pro-outside agitator, or are you anti-outside agitator? The idea that we're talking about communities and people with agency who themselves said, yeah, fuck this shit, it's time, we gotta kick off, nobody's listening to us. That doesn't even occur to this. This is just the flip side of, like, a lot of liberal bullshit.
Before LA kind of lit up in 1992. So for people to claim that the RCP is co-opting woke language, that's ridiculous. The wokes are co-opting them. They have a
The wokes are co-opting them. Because the wokes, like, seriously.
Record. They're the people that got flag burning legalized by the U.S. Supreme Court.
I have a feeling a lot of people were also behind that.
1984, Johnson versus Texas. An RCP guy at the Republican convention in 1984, he lit the American flag on fire, and they arrested him for flag desecration.
Okay, so that's like one fucking achievement, and even that is just... that was just the Supreme Court eventually agreed, and mostly, a majority said, yeah, you can't criminalize desecration of the flag and shit. So, like, that's the one actual concrete achievement that he's managed to come up with.
He took it to the Supreme Court.
And Caleb, you're the fucking patriotic socialist here. You're saying we have to like respect the RCP because one of their people got arrested for flag burning and it got taken all the way to the Supreme Court, probably with the support of way more people than just the RCP. I should know.
And he got flag burning legalized, right? And that was, it was a guy named Joey or Gregory Johnson, who was from the RCP. So their history of being active,
that case is still, that is one that, is taught in courses on, like, the First Amendment even today. That is one of the more seminal cases.
Involved in protests. They were key, and, when I was first coming around, the issue was protesting the Iraq War, and they were very key. They had something called Not in Our Name, which was an anti-war coalition that used, like, the Earth flag as its image.
And tell us, Caleb, what happened with that war? Like, did they stop the war, right? There wasn't the war after that, when they did the Not in Our Name. That was a great example of all these organizations that, all they could come up with. Answer and the RCP, apparently, and all these fucking organizations, and all they could come up with, and I'm not talking about just in the U.S., the Stop the War Coalition is no better, and the only thing they could think of is to just have people go for a walk with some placards. It's like, millions of people are about to die, and they've got no follow-up on the possibility that, the entire fucking U.S. military-industrial complex does not immediately, beg forgiveness when some people go on a walk in D.C. It is such a tell when motherfuckers act like that is some sort of an achievement. I suppose it is an achievement to have that little imagination. You've got enough people together in one place, in a strategic place, that you could really shut shit down if you were so inclined. But you didn't. They went on a fucking walk and then they went home. Like, that is not an achievement. That's something to be deeply embarrassed about.
I actually remember.
I was around in this time. And I also, at the time, I will say, I was excited. Wow, look at all these fucking people marching and everything. They're never going to have the war now. Look how unpopular it is. The thing is, unlike some motherfuckers, I actually learned from the experience and said, wow, wait a second. That clearly is that's not it. You've got to have some fucking follow-up. That isn't a success if you have a protest to stop the war. And the war happens anyway. That's when you failed.
Yeah, and so what I was reading in these...
Oh, actually, flag burning is illegal in a lot of places. Actually, Adam... well, no, first of all, flag desecration was a actual offense under the Texas Criminal Code. That's why he was charged with it. And flag burning was not actually recognized by the courts as a First Amendment, as protected by the First Amendment, until Johnson in Texas. That was the first time it actually made it up to the Supreme Court. And in fact, Kid Astro, you'll find in a lot of countries, flag burning and even just disrespecting flags is illegal in a lot of places. Like, all over Western Europe, they've got provisions in the criminal code saying that it's illegal to harm the flag, to disrespect the flag or something like that. In Germany, you can also get done for disrespecting the flag of another country, if that country presses charges. In the U.S., I mean, there were all sorts of criminal statutes banning flag burning. It was a huge thing. I mean, people were like right-wingers were obsessed over it in the 80s and 90s. And so all sorts of laws against like flag desecration were passed. So it was illegal. Hello, Demand Better Entertainment. Yeah, I mean, this went beyond the flag codes, because the flag codes don't have any criminal penalties attached to them. But these were things like these flag desecration laws that were enacted in a number of states did. So, I mean, that is true. I mean, actually...
These articles to make it sound like they just came out of nowhere, and stay away from them. They're this scary group that's come out of nowhere.
Well, they kind of have come out of nowhere because, they've been around, as you said, since 1975. And yet it is possible for people who are involved in leftist organizing not to have heard of them because they're actually tiny. They're tiny and they don't achieve anything. They just mostly sort of keep themselves to themselves.
To co-opt the abortion struggle. Like, that was just so false. And they were interviewing these, experts.
Yeah, on the RCP, if anything, the abortion struggle co-opted the RCP. I mean, we haven't had an abortion struggle until, 2016. And the thing is, this motherfucker, right here, did a whole thing about how the CPI should not take an interest in the abortion struggle. So here he is, big noting them, giving them credit for supporting something he said that he's, that his organization ought to be neutral on.
They're just like some college professor or something who's just like, oh yes, well, these are dangerous Stalinist organizations, blah 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 blah. And I saw that, and it made me angry because it was just everything that's wrong with the left nowadays, right? Is that they weren't interested in learning the actual history of the Revolutionary Communist Party, where they came from.
Well, let me just read you, since we're talking about learning about the Revolutionary Communist Party. Let me just read you this page. Bob Avakian. A radically different leader. A whole new framework for a human emancipation. Bob Avakian is completely different than the endless stream of bourgeois politicians who are put forward as quote-unquote leaders, whose goal it is to maintain one variation or another of this system of capitalism imperialism that is founded on and perpetuates itself through cruel and literally life-stealing exploitation. Bob Avakian is the architect of a whole new framework of a human emancipation, the new synthesis of communism, which is popularly referred to. That's taking some liberties right there. Popularly implies that somebody outside of your group's even heard of this shit. Popularly referred to as the new communism. Being a communist today, I'm reading here, means following Bob Avakian and the new path that he has forged. Like, I mean, this is this organization. Like, this is what they do. This is why they are totally irrelevant. And why when they kind of come up, they, you know, don't see their shadows, and they show up every once in a while and try to recruit from the naive and unwary. Like, the exact sort of people that Caleb Muppet recruits from. Nobody gives a shit about them, and nobody wants to work with them.
All they wanted to do is find some kind of scandal and tattle on somebody, you know, and that's been a theme in a lot of your documentaries. And so,
yeah,
you know, that's really all that these people wanted to do. They weren't interested in where this group came from, what they believe, why they might be wrong about what they believe.
Well, I mean, actually, if you read the statement, which I linked, it's the links in chat, they are interested in what this group believes. And, in fact, the reason they're saying don't work with this group is what this group believes. They link to articles on the group's website in which the group says what the group believes, and they say this is why we're not going to work with these people. Oh yeah, he's a total grifter. He's a total grifter. I don't know how successful he is at the grift, but he's managed to keep it going for long enough, and that is why he has Caleb Maupin's admiration, even though actually they are competing over rubes.
They just wanted to point fingers. Oh, these are bad people. Aha, we found a scandal. And it was frustrating for me, so I thought, that's when I first got the idea I might write this book. What do you think?
I think there's a key word that you mentioned there, too, that I would maybe like you to expand on, and it's the word cult. Anybody?
Yes, because Caleb Maupin, who operates a cult, who is actually obsessed with cult tactics, according to former members of the original CPI, which kicked him out. He's obsessed with the techniques cult leaders use in order to big note themselves. Like, he has people practice applauding enthusiastically and, like, laughing at his jokes and shit like that in advance, so that when new people show up to a CPI event, they see, you know, nothing but people who are just so excited to be there and listen to this dickhead.
Anybody who starts research on the RCP and ends up going through their Wikipedia page even, the first thing that they're going to notice is that their Wikipedia page says, in the first paragraph, I think it might even be the second sentence, they are generally known as a cult.
Wow, I mean, how could you imagine that a group that that says things like Bob Avakian, on the basis of decades of hard work, brackets, has been developing a whole body of work theory to advance the science of communism, to advance the science of revolution, to more deeply explain where the problems come from. I mean, like, it's all just sucking up to Bob Avakian. This is their fucking website I'm reading. Where could anyone get an idea that a website, that an organization whose website is just one big rhetorical fucking rim job to their leader is a cult?
Which it's a means to they weaponize the word cult against basically any group that's doing anything that requires leadership.
Really? Like, what exactly is the RCP doing, though? Like, I mean, they haven't given an actual example of, like, I guess one of their members burned a flag, and the case ended up in the Supreme Court. But, like, I mean, that's not a whole lot to show for nearly 50 years of existence.
At this point. But I'm interested in maybe go into a little bit further as to how they've weaponized that word specifically against RCP.
Well, what's interesting is that, I mean, Netflix, you'll notice, is obsessed with cults. You watch a comedy on Netflix, it's going to be about a cult. You watch a documentary on Netflix, it's going to be about a cult.
Well, and that's so weird, because I watch lots of comedies and documentaries and TV shows on Netflix. Only one of them has ever been about a cult, and it's the one about fucking Scientology. And that's kind of interesting to bring that up, because that also discusses the Nation of Islam's relationship with Scientology as sort of a vector to allow Scientology to exploit the black community. And I bring this up because guess who's a real big fan of Louis Farrakhan? Yeah, this motherfucker on the left here.
You watch a true crime movie, it's going to be about a cult. Like Netflix, it talks about nothing but cults practically, right? And
yeah, like, does he think that... Who's he saying this to? Like, does he think that people haven't watched Netflix? Like, who are these people who know that Netflix exists, but are so unfamiliar with what's on Netflix that they could think that Netflix is about nothing but cults? See, I tend to think that if everything you're watching on Netflix is about cults, that's kind of a you thing, Caleb.
it's just cults. There's groups, and it's like trying to like psych you up, like stay home, stay on your couch, and never get involved in any religious or political movement because it's probably a cult. You know, go ahead.
I'd even say they do that because they've helped curate the sort of fandom.
He's not even gonna just say, could you give an example of some of this, like, all cults all the time programming on Netflix? These motherfuckers are gonna be talking about Netflix to a bunch of people who have seen Netflix, because I think probably it's safe to say everyone who's watching this has probably seen Netflix, as if they had never heard of Netflix.
Mode, which is a very like sort of consumer cult mode, and they, to direct you away from the fact that you might interrogate that, here's the real cults, you know.
Right, and it's a loose definition that has no meaning, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
This is what he goes on. He goes off on this bullshit a lot. That I mean, first of all, if you hear that something's a cult, that means it's based. First of all, you caught that. But the term cult doesn't mean anything, which is kind of weird because Caleb again is obsessed with cults and has very much spent a lot of time perfecting his like style of social control within the organizations that he's been a part of, that he's been in control of, at least until they kick him out, to be very much a cult of personality around him, despite the fact that he hasn't got a personality. It's a cult of personality for a motherfucker who has no personality.
the more you dig into it, you know, one man's cult is another man's political party, religion. I mean, it's a matter
and that man is Bob Avakian.
It's a matter of being in the eye of the beholder on the one hand, and on the other hand,
Are you going to engage with some of the definitions of cults?
all organizations, to some degree, have central authority. All organizations...
No, they don't. Not all organizations have central authority. Some organizations, some entire, like, social structures reject the very notion of a central authority. The Mapuche, for example, in South America, in what is now territory occupied by Chile and Argentina, they famously have never actually stopped resisting colonization because there's no central authority who could actually accept terms of surrender that everybody that all of the Mapuche would accept. Like, this idea that there's no such thing as an organization that has no central authority is just nonsense.
Are going to make some type of demand on their membership. The question is, there are some organizations that have a lot more cohesion than others, and there are some organizations that are very, very loose.
Yeah, I mean, and it's interesting because if all organizations have central authority, Caleb, but not all organizations are referred to as cults. Do you think that maybe there is some literature discussing the difference between those things? Like maybe there's a definition, a working definition we could look at and engage with, and you could then explain why that definition's no good, but maybe people have put that forward. Like, I mean, since you're spending all this time explaining why your competitor isn't a cult, because acknowledging even one cult means that people that the screw if he has to reject the idea that cults as a concept even makes sense because he's got a cult.
There's some organizations where the leader is very glorified and almost worshipped. There's some organizations where you don't even know who the leader is, and it's like a sliding scale. And this is how human beings.
If you don't know who the leader is, then in what way are they the fucking leader? Like, if they don't have, if you don't know who the leader is, then clearly they must not have a whole lot of say in what goes on.
Tend to organize themselves, but the cult phobia kind of thing is really
cult phobia. Oh, you're cult shaming. The wokes are cult shaming.
Part of the liberal order.
Yes.
It's part of the liberal coming out of the Second World War. And as the USA started facing off with the Soviet Union, there was this book, True Believer, that was widely read and promoted by Harry Truman that tried to equate the communists with the Nazis. And it was this argument that, like, well, we think for ourselves.
He's gone off on a completely different subject, though. Like, this isn't
in the West. Whereas these people in these other countries, they follow the leader. And it became a whole big part of, like, liberal propaganda. And then it gets even weirder, because if you get into the 1970s, you have the communist organizations, they're emerging, and then you have American intelligence kind of.
I mean, and at this time, it's worth noting that one of the biggest cults, one of the most notorious cults, is an explicitly anti-communist cult. The Moonies, which was created with the assistance of the KCIA, which was the name of the secret police during the fascist period in South Korea, and therefore also with a big assist from the U.S. CIA, because, I mean, the South Korean CIA did not do shit without permission from the U.S. CIA. One of the biggest cults were, like, explicitly fucking reactionary right-wing things that were explicitly opposed to communism.
Setting up various different groups to, like, recruit the people who would be communists. And that was a thing that was happening. Like, the Hare Krishna movement was big among peace activists. And this was a religious sect from India that's actually quite conservative, right? I mean, very anti-communist, but...
Well, yeah, exactly. So, yeah, isn't that interesting? So when you're, like... When you're trying to say that talking about cults is anti-communist, and yet for most of the history of cults, the biggest ones have all been very explicitly right-wing and anti-communist? Like, do you see how that kind of creates a little bit of an oopsie-doodle for your argument there?
They imported them to the United States, and they would show up at all the anti-war rallies and beat on their drums and dance around. And the kind of person who might become communist would become a Hare Krishna. And so you had American intelligence kind of...
Sort of like somebody who might become a communist might end up in the RCP or the CPI.
Importing these different religious sects and groups in the 1970s. And then you have different sections of the American state infiltrating these various groups and using them against each other, which is something that comes up in this book. And then... Again. And you have the ex-cult industry emerging.
Yeah, and here's the thing, because... sorry. In BreadTube Serves Imperialism, he does this whole thing about how fucked up the Moonies are, the Moonie cult. Who they have a newspaper that they operate, a fairly well-known newspaper in the U.S. called the Washington Times, not the Washington Post. You can't go past a street corner with a newspaper machine on it in Washington, D.C. without seeing the Washington Times, and it is owned by the Moonies. Okay, so he has this whole thing about, yeah, they're horrible, they're this anti-communist cult and stuff like that. But he's trying to discredit a guy by the name of Steve Hassan, who's an asshole, let's just say it. He's transphobic as fuck. But he doesn't, but Caleb doesn't like him because he's spent a lot of time specifically with, like, cult deprogramming. He was with the Cult Awareness Network. And so, first there's this idea that you can't listen to Steve Hassan because he was with the Moonies. And then there's, you shouldn't listen to him because after he left the Moonies, he spent the rest of his life trying to fight against the Moonies. He really just talks out of both sides of his ass on this.
Which involved kidnapping people right? You know, this professional kidnapping service where if your adult child.
Well, I mean, the way the monarchy controlled the nobles is they were trading money. They were trading, fealty for protection. Fundamentally, I mean, essentially, what you had there was a situation where, and it was fealty for protection all the way down. I mean, that's what serfs were getting from like the lowest level feudal lords as well. Everybody was getting like their army would be. Like, you could either have their army with you or against you. And that was the whole way that feudalism essentially worked.
You know, your college kid joins one of these groups. You can pay Ted Patrick hundreds of dollars to go, grab them off the street and lock them in a basement and browbeat them until they renounce the group. And it turned into it was a nutty aspect of the liberal order. And, when you talk about the Yankee and Cowboy War and the divisions in the ruling class,
the Yankee and Cowboy
ruling
War?
class was fighting each other back in the 1970s. And
I mean, the ruling class, he acts like that is some sort of a weird thing that happens only once in a while. There are conflicts of interest within the ruling class all the time. Because the ruling class are capitalists, and capitalists are in competition with each other in all sorts of ways. If they're capitalists in the same industry, they're in competition with each other because of that. But sometimes capitalists in different industries are in competition. Like, if your money is in, like, beachfront property, you're not always going to see eye to eye with somebody whose money is in offshore oil drilling. And the whole point of the capitalist state is to mediate between them and the working class who they all need to exploit. This is like, he acts like this is some sort of a weird, thing that happens only in times of crisis, that there are divisions in the ruling class, when the reality is, and this isn't some novel idea I'm developing here, Marx said it, James Connolly said it, pretty much every, serious theorist of capitalism has said it. Oh, well, yeah, protection as in, a protection scheme, like standover men.
And they were utilizing various political and religious organizations for that end, right? There was a fight between Ronald Reagan and the conservatives and Richard Nixon and all of them versus, the kind of liberal Eastern establishment, the Rockefellers, Zbigniew Brzezinski, Jimmy Carter, and that a lot of different organizations from all kinds of religious and political backgrounds ended up being kind of pawns in this fight. And that's where the whole cult mindset, that's where that comes out of, right?
Yeah, okay, based on what? My understanding is that the whole issue of cults comes from the fact that there are organizations that use various forms of fucking mind control on people and control their access to information, and often do things like, force people to quit their jobs and work only for the organization and make the leaders of the organization a whole bunch of money in all sorts of dodgy ways, while not allowing any kind of questioning or debate within the organization. Sort of like what you did with Caleb, with the John Brown volunteers, you acted as their fucking landlord.
Right, and so that's kind of interesting, and then it's just kind of stuck in our culture, right? And at this point, there's this cult phobia, and what they're really trying to tell people in the United States is don't join any kind of movement. It's okay to sit on the internet and argue about.
Well, because obviously, all these groups. Let me just find the statement again. Let me find the statement. All these. Okay. If there's one thing that unites NYC for abortion rights, the Reproductive Justice Collective, United Against Racism and Fascism in NYC, Fund Abortion Not Police, Feminist Collages NYC, Shout Your Abortion, Washington Square Park Mutual Aid, Buckle Bunnies, Texas, Mujeres en Resistencia, NYNJ, Abortion Access Front, Reproductive Freedom Fund, The Jane Fund, Reproductive Rights Coalition, Tigers for Choice, Chicago Abortion Fund, the National Institute for Reproductive Health Action Fund, SWAP Brooklyn People's March, Forward Midwifery, SM Abortion Activists, New Mexico Religious Coalition for Reproductive Choice, Women's Information Network of NYC, and Chicago DSA Socialist Feminist Working Group, is that they do not want you to join any organizations. Like, seriously. He assumes that this is all about self-selection here. Because the idea is that there will be two groups of people. The people who look this stuff up and say, wait a second, when I'm looking at the documents, the articles he's talking about, what he says doesn't make any sense based on them. It sounds like he's full of shit. And the people who will just take his fucking word for it. And he's talking to the people who will just take his fucking word for it. Those are the rubes he's looking
about
for.
Your beliefs. It's okay to watch influencers and streamers you might like, but don't join an actual group. Don't join an actual community. That's what they're really banking on, because they know that things in the United States are getting rough. It's really hard for people to survive on their own. People are angry. They want to do something about it. It's not simply a matter of wanting to feel like...
This is what the RCP are banking on. This is what the CPI are banking on. And they don't want to do anything about it. In fact, I mean, you never find any evidence of them doing anything about it. Like, I mean, they sell merch. You know, they sell books. There's a whole lot of money going in, and it's never particularly clear where that money is, what that money is actually used for. I mean, he's about to tell on himself pretty big time, I think.
They have all the answers, and they're really, really nervous about the rise of some kind of illiberal movement in the United States.
Oh, that's interesting that he uses the term illiberal. Illiberal for people, I mean, as far as I can tell, that term really started to become a thing when the Hungarian fascist movement started using it to describe themselves. Their euphemistic description was illiberal. And so, I mean, you never hear communists calling themselves illiberal. It is literally something that reactionaries who are at the very least fascist adjacent and probably actually outright organized with fascists say about themselves. So when he's saying an illiberal movement, he's kind of telling on himself again here.
States that could counter the rise of the low-wage police state. And so this is what
the rise... He keeps on talking about the low-wage police state as if it didn't already exist. It's something that is going to happen if we don't stop it, and the only way to stop it is to give Caleb money. But, I mean, the minimum wage is, is still in the fucking single digits. It has not actually increased more than once or twice in the past 20 years in the U.S. It's not indexed to inflation. Prices are, prices have been going through the roof. We have, if you look at non-managerial real wages, what you'll find is going since about 1973, they have been more or less flatlining. But then, and meanwhile, spending on cops, the emphasis on tough on crime bullshit, that's been going on since the 70s, and it has been escalating with every passing decade. And it doesn't matter what party is in government, they always are obsessed with fucking having more cops and giving them more guns and all this, and more prisons too, and all this bullshit. So I mean, what is this low wage police state that doesn't already exist? We already are in a low wage police state. And if he's against the police state, then how is it he never talks about Stop Cop City? Because that is the front line of the struggle against the police state right now. None of this fucking RCP bullshit. They aren't doing anything about it. I mean, those people are putting their asses on the line to stop the escalation of police terror in this country.
The new cult scare, you might call it, I think is about, and that the RCP has been viciously targeted around this. They, as much as I disagree with their political line, and I make that clear in the book, what is their political line? What do you disagree with? That would be much more interesting than this nonsense. The smear they've been hit with, that they're a cult, they're going to brainwash you.
Yeah, I'm sure they're thankful that Caleb Maupin has come to the rescue to say that they're not a cult. I mean, that's an endorsement second only to fucking Scientology.
That is bullshit, and anyone who's been around them for a few minutes can tell you that's bullshit. So yeah,
it might. Well, something that would be good is if, and this is, I'm going to use this to transition to the next question, but it would be good to maybe articulate
Are you allowed to transition in the CPI? I thought that was something for the wokes.
Some kind of material analysis of what a cult really is, because it sits on basically a fully idealist spectrum at this point.
Oh, okay. Are you going to actually develop that idea? Because that is not, I mean, every definition of cults that I've seen has been fairly materially based.
Yeah,
it's not even a thing, really.
Yeah, well, when I was in a kid,
You tell us more about how there are no cults to people who are in a cult.
Church library, they had a lot of really old books, from like the 1920s and stuff. And I remember in the church library, I found a book called The Four Major Cults. And I looked at it, and it was this really old book, and it said it had Mormons, Seventh-day Adventists, Christian Science, and Jehovah's Witnesses. Right? And in Spanish, my wife speaks Spanish. In Spanish, they don't have a word for cult.
Yeah, they do. Secta. They've got a word for cult in pretty much in every language I know, and that's a few languages. And la palabra que se ocupa en español para decir cult es secta. Es una secta. Conche tu madre, weón. If she speaks Spanish and she doesn't know that there's a word for cult in Spanish, then that's kind of weird, because it's not an unusual word. It's used a lot. In the exact same way that it's being used, that cult is being used here.
The word they have is sect, or secta.
Yes, that is the word for cult, you dickhead. That is literally, it means the same thing.
And that, especially if you go to the Middle East, there's always been religious organizations that are considered so deviant from the mainstream of religion that they are small, right? And so that is something that's been in our culture for many, many years, right? In the Middle East, you have Christians, you have Muslims.
I love how he says, oh, well, there's no word for cult in Spanish. Oh, but my wife who speaks Spanish, she says the word is the word for cult in Spanish. And he just sort of blithely just moves on after completely debunking his own fucking point.
Muslims, you have Jews. But then you have Alawites, and then you have Yazidis, and you have these really small religions, right? And that's what cult used to mean before it became a weaponized intelligence term, right? It was the English version of this.
That's such a weird thing that he's decided to settle on this idea that it is a weaponized intelligence term, when, as he himself has pointed out, some of the biggest cults in U.S. history, in modern U.S. history, have had the backing of either the literal CIA or at the very least a significant segment of the capitalist class.
The Spanish word secta, that refers to really small religious groups.
That's not what it refers to. You say secta, it means cults. If I translate what he's saying, as into Spanish, that is the word I will use. I'm a native Spanish speaker. I sé de lo que estoy hablando, y este weón no sabe lo que habla. Bueno, como dicen, el que sabe, sabe, y el que no es jefe. Y este weón es jefe.
That is so out of step with the mainstream religions that it's considered to be deviant or unhealthy or something like that. Right? That's what cult used to mean. Now it means something completely different.
Well, okay, give us a definition. Are you gonna give us a definition? You've been talking about this shit for...
Now it means sit on your couch and watch Netflix, or else you're being brainwashed by Vladimir Putin.
Yeah, because Netflix, as we all know, is just nothing but cults. You turn it on, it's you go to DS9 on Netflix, and it's just DS9 episodes that are to do with cults. You go to The Good Place on Netflix, and it's just The Good Place episodes that are to do... who the fuck listens to this and is like, wow, this guy really, he's somebody you can listen to. He's somebody that you can really believe in. Because he says that Netflix is nothing but, anti-cult propaganda.
So there you go.
And he still hasn't... You see how he just very quickly ducked away from actually defining the term cult.
But, yeah.
Well, speaking of material distinctions that might be made, Avakian's theoretical framework, which is the official framework of the RCP.
Which is totally not a cult-like thing to do. To just have the leader's theoretical framework be the official framework of the organization, and nobody else is contributing to it. It's just like nobody else gets to have a look in. It's just the great leader's ideas, and that's it.
Which I've seen officially referenced as various different things that ultimately total in the new synthesis of communism. It can sound, when you actually get into it, like when you read the, in preparation for this, I went into and I read part of a manifesto that had been written on it.
Wow. I mean, this is like when Jordan Peterson was gonna fucking debate Slavoj Žižek on Marxism. And so, as a flex, Peterson said that he finally got around to reading part of the Communist Manifesto in preparation for the debate.
But it can be very similar sounding to a critique of authoritarian socialism that we hear from like DSA or like the other non-Marxist leftists. At what separate?
Yeah, that's interesting because there are lots of like fucking Marxists who are critical of what might be called authoritarian socialism, and who would actually reject the idea that it is socialism.
Rates, RCP, the new synthesis of communism, and Bobavakian.
I mean, but DSA, just to be clear, they're just social democrats
from those sects,
and they're not even that really. I mean, fundamentally, what they do, I mean, they suck up to Democrats. That's their fucking praxis.
Well, right. That's a good question, because that's one of my major criticisms of his so-called new synthesis, is that it just seems to be a rehashing of the standard anti-authoritarian critique of socialist countries.
Which is a little bit weird, because he isn't exactly averse to authoritarianism.
Except it's applied in an inconsistent way.
Well, of course it's applied in an inconsistent way. He can't be consistently anti-authoritarian and be the unquestionable great leader, the infallible great leader of the Revolutionary Communist Party. Like, has he ever had to, actually contest a leadership election against anyone?
Maintains the Soviet Union was socialist from the time of the Bolshevik Revolution until 1956. He maintains that China was socialist from...
Yeah, I mean, the thing is, it's cringe because they don't do anything. In fact, they are militantly opposed to having any kind of meaningful principles. Look at what happens when the people who use them as a springboard to start their political careers, like AOC, like Jamal Bowman, who basically go right out and say, yeah, fuck everything you guys stand for. And so they were faced with two choices, both of which ultimately acknowledge that they are, as an organization, utterly ineffectual. One was to, issue some kind of censure and say, yeah, we don't consider you to be part of our group anymore. But of course, obviously, because there's no accountability, there's no reason that any of these Democrats that they back give a shit about that. The Democrats can just say, fuck you, we've got the Democratic Party, we don't need you. But, I mean, or they can do the other thing that's even more ineffectual, which is say, yeah, we're just gonna still keep supporting them even though they explicitly shit all over everything we claim to stand for. And the thing is, the minute you've had even that happen even once, is the moment where you should be reconsidering your entire approach to, sucking up to Democrats and maybe consider, getting into politics. But, but they don't. I mean, I'm not saying there aren't good people in DSA. I have friends in DSA. I have friends in DSA who have watched in great consternation as the DSA leadership... I mean, there was the time that they just sort of gobbled up the funds that were supposed to go to Charlottesville pogrom survivors, and then they said, yeah, our bad. We put it into general funds. It's kind of gone. And then there was no discussion of it after that, and I never heard any kind of resolution that involved the money going to the people it was intended for. And then you have all this sort of stuff. I mean, but there are good people within there. The stuff like fixing people's brake lights and stuff like that to cut down, have one less reason for them to be arbitrarily stopped by cops and stuff like that. that's, you know, that's good. That's practical solidarity. I'm there for it. And I'm, you know, there are people in the DSA who I totally consider to be, you know, comrades, who I consider to be, like, solid people that I would totally work with. But I think the organization sucks shit, and I don't, and I find that increasingly a lot of the people I know who are associated with it feel the same way. Yeah, I mean, see, my approach to organization, I call it organizational polyamory. I mean, I am in one organization at the moment. I'm in the IWW, and I've been sort of on the periphery of the IWW for a very long time. A lot of people I know are in there, but for the most part, my approach to organizations is I'm sort of in the periphery of lots of them. I meet people who seem to be sound sort of people who I get on with personally and can work with politically and stuff like that, and form relationships. Because the thing is, those relationships will often outlast the organizations. Organizations come and go. Sometimes they're purpose-built and they're designed to come and go, and sometimes they just fall apart because they have internal contradictions or whatever, and it's not inherently a bad thing. But, you know, you can build from... But fundamentally, an organization is just a way to sort of institutionalize operating from relationships amongst people. And so there are lots of ways to do that, and mine is that I just sort of, like, hang out on the periphery of just about any organization, any organization that I'm near, you know, can actually, you know people in, that seems to be, you know, has sound people in it, and there are and I just kind of maintain the relationship whether the organization exists or not. Because I think that is probably a more stable way forward in the end. I am not very near Philly, but, I mean, good advice, Adam. I mean, I don't know if anyone else is in Philly. I haven't been to Philly in ages. Like, except to change planes and shit. But, okay. We're running out of time. Once again, lovely to see you all. Nice to see you again, Raven G. And Adam, and Adria, and Kitastro, and Almal. Very good to see you. Always, as I was saying in the Discord, Raven, are you on the Discord? Let me drop the Discord link in here for anyone who is on here and isn't in the Discord but would like to join. Because that's where you can keep in touch with me in between and give, like, suggestions and ideas and stuff like that. Here's the Discord link. You're all cordially invited. Great seeing you all. I hope that you enjoyed this stream as much as I enjoyed making it. And keep an eye out. I am continuing to work on this mega huge video essay over 2 years in the making on media analysis and propaganda and all this sort of things. Yeah, nice of you to say only, since I'm 44. The shooting is progressing apace, and Chapter 2 of Colin Tye's social basis of the female question, I still have to do the formatting. I had some other translation work I had to take care of this past week, and I'm taking a little bit of a break before I start on the final chapter, which is Chapter 3. But this week, I am definitely going to have all that formatting done. I'm going to put up the PDF version on my Patreon, to which I will also drop a link right now. You can also find my writings and stuff like that. Song lyrics are on there and you can find tasters from Chapter 2 and previous chapters and shit like that. It's all sorts of neat stuff. But anyway, have a good night, and see you next week on Friday at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I look forward to it. And if you see any videos any just cringe right-wing or liberal bullshit that you'd love to see me talk about on stream, drop a link in the not the Patreon, the Discord. And I mean, I love to take requests. It saves me the work of having to go through all of this bullshit, and which already is like distorting the shit out of my YouTube recommendations, so I get bullshit like J. Michael Bailey served to me in the Rex, and I don't like that. So I mean, if other people see shit that they want me to react to, and they, drop it in the Discord, that makes my life easier, and it'll make the stream more exciting for everybody. So have a good night.